Hey, what's up everybody? Jonathan Thames here from Rosie and Ernie Productions. Welcome to the Multimedia Megafan channel. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the 2020 film Wonder Woman 1984, the film that Warner Brothers thought was worthy of Oscar nomination. This is the 9th installment into the DCEU and marks part 9 of this DCEU review series. So this movie is another very mixed bag for me. I will say that I overall have a fun time with it, and there are several things I do like and get enjoyment out of, but there are also several things that I think are just absolutely ridiculous, stupid, or silly, and sometimes it's a combination of both of those feelings surrounding the same thing. Director Patty Jenkins returns to deliver her follow-up to the 2017 smash hit movie Wonder Woman, which, ironically enough, this movie is almost absolutely nothing like, shy of the opening scene. Which I would have to say is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. The movie opens with a really exciting and engaging, heartfelt, and sincere scene that takes place at a competition on Themyscira when Diana is a little girl, and it really lays out the groundwork for a great theme that could have really impactfully been developed upon throughout the film. But, unfortunately, that wasn't very well done in my opinion. The scene that follows that thrusts us into the 1980s and leads us to a point of action that surrounds a heist at a mall from a store that's dealing black market goods out of their backdoor inventory. And this whole sequence is just played out in a very silly, over-the-top, very cartoony way. Now, it definitely has its fun value. The score by Hans Zimmer is great. And the action, the color, and the silliness do come together to create a genuine feeling of excitement within me. But there are also a number of things that stand out to me as being pretty cringy too. And that pretty much describes a good bit of the scenes in the movie. It's also worth noting that it takes a considerable amount of time before the movie takes us to our next point of action. The time in between is spent on developing the arcs of the characters of Barbara Minerva, aka Cheetah, Maxwell Lord, and Diana, who is initially still grieving over the loss of Steve Trevor and in a state of being alone when the movie begins. And it's all done in a very inconsistent fashion, and is kind of a scattered hodgepodge of borrowed elements from various other best friend dramas and rom-coms from the mid-80s to early 90s range, complete with a case of popular girl envy, a wardrobe montage, and a highly exaggerated fish out of water scene. Now to be fair, both the wardrobe montage and the fish out of water bits were slightly present in the first movie, but not to such an overplayed and highly exaggerated degree, and in the case of the clothing montage in particular, I can way more easily justify its presence in the first film because it doesn't feel like it was just put there to serve as a filler. Meaning, I can see why Diana having to select a more appropriate wardrobe to fit into the world of men could be considered relative and add value to the story. But in this movie, it's simply there to give us something to giggle at and fill up a little bit of space and time that unfortunately does very little, if anything, to add any real value to the story being told. And it certainly doesn't help to make it feel like a good Wonder Woman movie. The story mainly centers around Diana as she attempts to discover the origins of a mysterious dreamstone that appears to grant wishes to those who come into contact with it, after successfully wishing Steve Trevor back to life. Which, I have much more to say about that here in just a few minutes. To briefly summarize, the stone eventually falls into the hands of Maxwell Lord, who they portray as a struggling con man, who uses the stone very effectively with a pretty clever wish of his own that enables him to gain seemingly limitless power and influence over the entire world. When Diana discovers the origins of the stone and its creation, she realizes that these wishes come with a major cost and that she has to find a way to stop Max Lord and to stop the stone's power from further spreading before it's too late. Here's where I'll start to pick some things apart. From a general movie-going audience standpoint, meaning from the perspective of someone who is completely unfamiliar with these characters and goes into this with little to no expectation as to what to receive from these characters, I thought everything to do with Maxwell Lord was done pretty well. He is executed in a very over-the-top and comical sort of way for the most part, and is backed up by an extremely animated and mesmerizing performance by Pedro Pascal. And I actually do feel like that is probably the most entertaining, engaging, and well-executed element in the entire movie. However, being familiar with the character from the comics and the TV shows, I thought that this was kind of an odd and underwhelming arc to carry his character through. Maxwell Lord from the comics is originally a Justice League villain, and is portrayed as a very successful and savvy businessman who is brilliant and very craftily manipulative well before gaining any metahuman abilities. To paint him as this sort of genericized failing con man who isn't crafty enough or clever enough to successfully function without obtaining the Dreamstone seems like a poor choice in my opinion, and it really undermines what makes the character such a formidable opponent for the Justice League. I also thought it was kind of strange and was actually pretty disappointed by the fact that they chose to focus on him as the primary villain, because I really went in with the expectation that this movie was going to have Cheetah as the primary villain, which I was really looking forward to. Though, oddly enough, I really would have to say that the movie was probably better for doing that, given the direction that they chose to go in for Cheetah's character in this movie. I was extremely disappointed with their handling of this character. When they first announced that Cheetah was going to be in this movie, I was really excited, and was even further excited when they announced that Kristen Wiig had been cast, which I thought was a very interesting and intriguing choice that was filled with a lot of potential for awesomeness. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe in Kristen Wiig's talent and truly think she would have been more than capable of delivering an amazing performance as this iconic Wonder Woman villain. But what they gave her to work with from a writing standpoint completely wasted and underutilized that potential, and like their portrayal of Max Lord, totally undermined the character's overall importance and impact in the world of Wonder Woman. I have to say, I really just don't understand why they didn't work around what the stories from the comics are, because they are so much more interesting and do such a better job at setting these characters up uniquely. In this movie, we get the very recycled story arc of this socially awkward, clumsy, and unconfident character that's played off as an outcast who's picked on and teased, that quite literally wishes to be like the popular girl, who happens to be Wonder Woman in this case, after Diana befriends her when she's hired on as a gemologist at the Smithsonian and is asked to assist the FBI in their investigation by taking a look at some of the items collected from the black market retailer from the heist in the beginning, which is where the Dreamstone is first discovered. After making her wish, Barbara wakes up the next morning instantly becoming stronger, more confident, and less clumsy, and is then sought out and charmed by Maxwell Lord, who convinces her to let him take the stone. And once he does, her character takes a pretty big step back onto the story's sidelines for the majority of the film, though we do get to see her sporadically as her wish's effects take full shape. Much to Barbara's surprise, of course, she slowly discovers that her wish to become more like Diana comes with some unpredicted benefits and grants her the strength and agility equivalent to Wonder Woman's. Unfortunately, these scenes offered very little satisfaction as to what I was hoping to get out of some awesome Cheetah scenes, most especially when it came to the final fight sequence between her and Wonder Woman during the last act. Similar to the mall heist scene, it does have its fun value from the cartoony and campy energy it provides, but the dialogue is bad, the CG is really bad, and the action is over way too quickly and is overall very underwhelming. On top of that, the final reveal of Cheetah's character design left a lot to be desired. I was extremely disappointed with how that turned out, because I've always thought that Cheetah is such an amazingly designed character, especially the Barbara Minerva incarnation of Cheetah who debuted in the comics in 1987. And I always imagined how cool it would be to see a live-action version of her. And this really sucked all the way around. I mean, I think the biggest issues are that they used all CG for her design and that they didn't utilize the source enough to base it off of. if they had chosen to go with a slightly more comic accurate design relative to the 87 comics or later, and chosen to implement much more practical makeup to help achieve the look, I think we could have had a much better result. But, as bad as it might be to screw up handling the antagonists of a film, I'd say it's much worse to mishandle the protagonist, but somehow they managed to do that as well, in my opinion. In contrast to the 2017 movie, this movie is not a great representation of Wonder Woman. Now, don't get me wrong, they get the design right, and the moments where she's actually dressed as Wonder Woman that are meant to deliver the fun, excitement, and action do that very well mostly. And in those scenes, Gal Gadot does help the character to shine through at certain points, delivering some relatively inspirational and emotionally driven dialogue. But where they really drop the ball is regarding who Diana is outside of the Wonder Woman persona. I feel like they just really failed to nail what it is that makes Diana herself in this movie in regards to her inner strength, her wisdom, and her judgment. And to clarify, I don't take issue with the fact that she still grieves over the loss of Steve almost 70 years after the fact. I totally believe that. I buy into that 100%. I mean, she loved him, and he made a big sacrifice and made a huge impact on her life and her perspective on the world of men, so obviously she'd be in an emotional place where she'd miss him and she'd think of him. But I really think they lean way too heavily into it, if I'm being completely honest, and she dwells in it to the point that she's basically void of any personality outside of it. It literally seems to consume her when she's not costumed up, and even to some degree when she is. And as a longtime fan of the Wonder Woman character, I just don't buy that. That isn't Diana. Again, I do believe she'd still mourn, but I do feel like that she'd approach her feelings with a much more grounded, strongly natured, and more courageous approach than she does in this movie. And whereas I do buy the fact that Diana would wish to have him back, how they went about it in this is just really fucking stupid, and honestly lends itself to some unnecessarily uncomfortable situations that could have easily been avoided, especially when considering the context of the premise this movie sets up. They made the really odd choice in this movie to bring Steve back in the form of his spirit, which actually inhabits the body of some other random guy. I mean, it's a dreamstone. We're within the context of a story that places us in a reality where a magic stone exists that grants wishes. That's already a pretty fantastic idea that pretty much opens itself up to where anything is possible without needing too much explanation. So why didn't they just have Steve come back as himself? I mean, in the context of this reality, there's absolutely nothing that would have prevented that from being a possibility. But for some weird reason, they felt it was better to go this route, which, again, leads to some really unnecessary uncomfortability when the scene arrives that clearly insinuates that the two spent the night together the previous evening. I mean, that's a hell of a Wonder Woman thing to do, isn't it? Letting herself give in to the irresistible need to sleep with her boyfriend with absolute and total disregard for the consent, or lack thereof, of the random male that her boyfriend's soul is inhabiting. Again, do I buy that she has the very strong, very human and passionate desire to make love to her boyfriend that she severely missed? Of course I do. But would Wonder Woman really so selfishly show such disregard to those circumstances and act so neglectfully before feeling the need to get to the bottom of the Dreamstone? Would she really prioritize her desire to sleep with Steve above finding out what the hell was going on? I really don't think so. And again, it all could have been easily avoided if they would have just simply brought him back, which would have made a lot more sense in my opinion. But I do have to say, the two still have great on-screen chemistry together, as they did before, and there are some moments that did genuinely make me smile or laugh. The wardrobe montage and fish-out-of-water scenes, for instance, though incredibly silly and not really adding much in terms of value to the film overall, did admittedly get me to laugh a couple of times, despite the quirkiness and the humor. And I really credit that mainly to Chris Pine's performance, who manages to deliver it all pretty well. I do especially enjoy the scene that they highlight in the trailer with the invisible jet, though how they set that up is again pretty ridiculous, and it's something that they just kind of randomly throw at you without any real explanation. They just kind of expect you to accept it and go with it. In conclusion, I'm really mixed about how I feel about this movie. From a filmmaking standpoint, I do believe that the cinematography, the coloring, the lighting, and the score all effectively pull together to create a fun and engaging environment, and I think that the performances are all delivered pretty decently, though I think they are largely inhibited by the writing. And it's primarily because of the writing that I don't believe this is a well-made film. And I really think it serves as a pretty crappy representation of the characters that are meant to embody the story. From a general movie audience-going standpoint, I'd say it's a silly but pretty fun and engaging movie that definitely provides a certain amount of excitement and entertainment for its audience. But from a hardcore fan's perspective, I'd say it's a frustrating and unfulfilling piece of junk that completely disrespects its source and the fan base of its characters, and it fails to deliver on what would be expected from a great Wonder Woman movie. Overall, I give the movie a rating of 5 out of 10 and only recommend it if you're a more casual fan of Wonder Woman or of DC, or if you're just a general moviegoer who is looking for a silly and fun time from a superhero movie, as I think it definitely does a decent job providing that element and feel like there are people who will walk away feeling entertained by it. But I really believe that the majority of hardcore fans of the character and of the franchise will likely walk away feeling pretty let down. But that's just my opinion. Wonder Woman 1984 can currently be found streaming on HBO Max, so if you have a subscription and you decide that you would like to go check it out after watching this review, or if you've already seen the movie, comment below and let me know what you guys thought about it. I want to thank everybody for watching today's review. I hope that everybody out there is doing well, and I'll see you all in the next video.